Welcome to the CEFACT Global Trust Registry project. The meeting will be recorded. I've pressed record already. A transcript will be generated. Minutes will be generated from the transcript. They'll all be made publicly available for all to see. The first order of business is just a reminder of codes of conduct and IPR rules. These are in the links that you can see on the slide. I'm not presenting a slide, am I? In the links of the slide you can't see that I'm trying to present to you. Here you go. In this slide are the code of conduct and the intellectual property rights. If you've signed up as a registered as an expert, you'll agree to these. I've actually got a form I'll show in a second that lets you accept those if you choose to accept them, even without registration processes, because I know a number of people on this call have struggled to get their heads of delegation to pay attention to do things, and I don't want that to slow up the process. So I'm sure all of us on this call at the moment are quite happy with the idea that the work we do for this particular project is effectively open source, royalty free, which is the primary IPR rule, and nothing in the code of conduct I'm sure would trouble any of us, but we kind of are required to ask people to accept those terms and conditions. So what I've done is to provide a simple form of that, which I'll see if I can get up in a second. So I'll just need to jump out of this. So on the website that I've got running here, there's a project participation. I'll put it in the chat, and that has a form embedded in the document in the actual sort of web page, which is one where you just basically can say, hey, my name is, here's my email address. I've nominated a country. You don't even need to nominate a country on this particular form, but it lets you say your interest in the project and you accept, if you like, the code of conduct and the intellectual property rights, and you can sort of tick a box. I mean, that just gives us something to say you've accepted. The other way of participating, if you've applied to be registered and you've got that email back, is to send the email to Alina and I, and then we'll know that you've accepted the terms and conditions and you can contribute. That's the primary sort of process of getting the contribution bit active. What we wanted to talk about today are a few things. So there's going to be a quick recap on the meeting 2 weeks ago, and then I want to hand over to Alina to talk about the governance requirements. Is that going to be okay, Alina? Are you okay to talk about that? You're just going to be a nod. That's fine. Well, you're still silent. Okay, I'll let you fiddle with that for a bit. Just nod if you're going to be okay when it comes up to being okay. Yeah, you're going to be okay. Okay, we'll work out this. We'll work out the volume in a bit, right? We could swap you around with Sankashan. Sankashan, I see, is online as well. Sankashan, you're going to be able to talk about the stuff you were doing. You were looking at Marcus's input. We were going to. I just have a discussion with you, if you like, around how we might handle the comments on the DIA spec for UNTP and a few other things. If that's okay with you.
Yep.
Cool. Okay, Alina, can we hear you now?
Yes. Can you hear me now?
Yes, we can.
Okay,
excellent.
Thank you. Perfect.
So, are you going to be okay to talk about the governance requirements?
Yes, definitely. I was working on the government's requirements, and I will share it with everybody and look for the feedback.
Let's do that in a second or two. The first thing is, I guess, just a reminder quickly about 2 weeks ago. We were looking at the sort of operations and governance and other things about how might such a thing work, this directory thing work. And we looked at how CEFACT low code works. So we looked at also how ICAO PKD works, the Civil Aviation Authority's PKD system. A couple of sort of good insights I thought came out of that discussion, which are kind of being fed into the work Alina will show us in a minute or two on the governance side. And also into the idea of sort of sustainability, that if this thing is going to be successful, it needs to be self-sustaining, it needs to generate enough revenue, but have a low cost profile, provide a significant value proposition, but have a revenue stream that is sustainable such that it can keep itself going without the need for sort of injections of charity, if you like, into the system for it to work. So that was the kind of insights. Those slides, like all the slides, they're kind of in this whole pack. It gets bigger every 2 weeks, but the pack has the previous slides in it as well. So we're just sort of adding to them, and you can go through those slides at your leisure if you want to. I'll put the link in for this deck into the chat just in case you want to have a look at it while we're talking. But the main thing I wanted to talk about today, the first two things are really going to be about the governance requirements and the sort of checklists and markers as spec updates. So should we stick to the original order? Alina, do you want to talk first? And I'll bring up, shall I bring up the, do you want to share the document and walk through?
Yes.
Would you prefer to share the document on your screen so you can pull us through, or do you want me to share the document on my screen?
I think if you can do that better.
Okay.
Okay.
So we've got a reminder quickly. We've got a governance requirements document, which is part of around here. This is the logical map of all the work we're doing. And the governance and operations is the deliverable number 4 on this map, this one here. But we've got some related sort of documents, which we'll talk to in a second, like the eligibility requirements for registrars to be inside this sort of circle here, this governance and operations circle. So these documents are numbered. So if we look at the deliverables folder, this is the folder. You've all got access to this as well. I'll share the link for that in the chat. This is the deliverables folder. So this, you should have view access to this. Alex has temporarily muted you, by the way, Lena, but as soon as you get to talking again, and I'm quiet, we won't hear the echo, Alex. It's okay. It's just my voice echoes through Alina's system somehow. So number 4 is the one we're going to be looking at here, the governance requirements. You can see the others are all numbered as well, and we've got a whole bunch of other things that are inside this deliverables folder. That's one of the conversations I want to have with Sankashan and Alina, but also with you all about how to simplify some of these maybe. Okay. I'll now be quiet, Alina, and I'll let you start talking, and I'll share this document.
Okay, thank you, Joel. I hope there is no echo coming from my computer this time. No. Okay. All good. As John was saying, I was working on some governance requirements because we have to consider in the first place that if all the registers that are going to join the Global Trust Registry have to necessarily fulfill a set of requirements, eligibility requirements that we have been working on in document number 1. I think that everybody has access to document number 1. Of course, if we consider that the registers have to fulfill this set of requirements, then necessary it would have to exist a United Nations body that would have to be in charge of the admission of these national registers in the global register. So coming back to the governance requirements, we have, I don't know if everybody has access to the documents. If not, you can, John is sharing it on the slide. Regarding the document purpose and the scope is the same for all the sections that we were working on. And then we have a set of concepts and definitions. Also, they're the same for all the sections that we were working on previously. Nevertheless, we added a few new definitions that were not included in the previous ones. I don't know if we can see them as well. Okay. In the first place, I refer to UN body as the competent United Nations body that adopts, administers, and oversees the Global Trust Registry and these governance requirements. We named it for the moment UN body, as we did not decide yet which would be the body in charge of the governance. So it might be CEFACT, but it could also be another United Nations body. So for the moment, we decided just to name it like that. We also added a few more concepts that you can see on the screen. Nevertheless, if anybody has different or new suggestions, we are open to accept all the suggestions. Then yes, I was working on
just for Sorry, can I
Yes.
pause this for one quick second?
Yes.
Because I haven't done something I said I would do when we were talking earlier this week, Lena. The phrasing we're using here, we'll modify. What I reminded myself when I saw the document is I want to
Yes.
separate out the GTR project, the project we're working on, from the system the project is going to recommend exists. And the system is going to have a different name probably than the Global Trust Registry. So just
yes,
for that,
we were talking about this,
Yeah.
about the name of the Global Trust Registry. You also named it CARD.
yeah. So JP to suggest new name. CARD is
New
one.
name
That's the
is
UNCFACT
CARD.
authoritative registry directory. The other one I've come up with is GRID, which is the Global Registrar Information Directory. But the idea is that if we call it a global trust registry, all sorts of confusions might come about from calling it that. So we're name with project, we're not changing the name of the project.
Yeah,
But
the idea is this to avoid all these confusions, because many people, many experts were also asking me if we intend to create a huge database or if we intended to grant access to national databases. This would not even be possible, even if we intended to. So just to avoid this sort of confusions, I think John is right. We should consider different names, and these are just two of them, but might also be others. So as I was saying, I was also working on a set of principles, because the establishment, administration, and oversight of the Global Trust Registry shall be guided by a set of principles, obviously legality and transparency, proportionality, risk-based approach, interoperability, which are the main principles that we that have to rule the whole project. Actually, security, trust by design, data minimization, and a protection of the registry legal effect. We also have non-derogation and safeguards. So just to mention that nothing in this section shall derogate, displace, or diminish the domestic legal effects or legal frames and or procedure of authoritative registers. This just, we have to make it, for us it was obvious, but we have to make it clear for everybody. That's why I thought it would be a good idea to also mention this clause. And then starting with the institutional framework, as I mentioned before, we decided for the moment to name the UN body just like this before we decide who is going to be in charge of the governance. So regarding the functions of the UN body, it would definitely serve as a custodian of the Global Trust Registry and public data sets, appoint and oversee the operator, establish and support the board, and approve its rules of procedure, approve the fees, schedules, because we were talking about the implementing some fees, obviously, and maintain the official notice and contact points lists for the participants. Nevertheless, ensure the transparency, which is one of the main principles. Regarding the board, because we also considered to create a board, I mentioned the requirements regarding designation, mandate, composition. We thought that it would typically have between 5 and 15 members, ensuring balanced regional representation and appropriate expertise. I also mentioned the nomination and the appointment, how the board members shall be appointed by the UN body, following a public call, obviously, for nominations. And also it should have a secretariat. The secretariat supports the governance and the publication. The operator appointed by the UN body shall execute day-to-day services. The board also may constitute an advisory and technical working groups. So I also refer to advisory and working bodies.
Quick
And
pause if I can, Alina.
Yes, yes.
I think this is really impressive, and I genuinely mean that. And I'm wondering whether we should cite a source for this. In other words, it's echoing a similar structure to say EKO-PKD or something else.
Yes,
Or is
that
this
was the idea.
It is EKO-PKD. So we should probably, to avoid any unnecessary resistance, say this is built on a model previously used successfully by the UN in EKO-PKD or something like that, just so that we can tell people where all this has come from.
Yes, we consider actually a hybrid system, not one or another. EKO-PKD on one hand, on the other, UN low code, because it would be similar. So we merged the rules from both systems, and this is what it is, or this is how it looks now. So and then coming back to participation and going into effect, I refer to participants, and then admission. Of course, as I mentioned in the beginning, the national registers, land, business, asset registers should fulfill a set of eligibility requirements that are in the that we were working on in the section number 1. So once they fulfill these requirements, then the UN body, the applicant is eligible for listing where the scheme owner. So this is the point, the section number 4 that I refer to eligibility. Also, referring to the national, or what is the national focal point, we consider that each member state shall designate one or several national focal points as its official interface with the UN body regarding admission, updates, suspension, and retirements of schemes. So this UN body shall maintain and publish the list of the national focal points and their remits. Regarding the dossier, then the dossier shall be complete and accurate, and would include a set of documents or requirements that they would have to fulfill, such as legal mandate and scope, with the citation and scope of the instrument that has been through which has been created, identity and competence of the scheme owner, control of the official domain, and the issuer deed with the proof.
Alina,
Yes.
again, I just want to sort of, for the audience really, because I think this is really, as someone has said in the chat, this is excellent work. And I just want to point out to people where there's an opportunity to simplify some of our sort of deliverable things, because we look at, for example, this list of things here, they're kind of declaring the information that we want to have as a dossier, information from registrars.
Yes.
And if we look at the this sort of model of information, we had this idea about the data types to be recorded and eligibility requirements to be met, 01 and 02. So we have the opportunity perhaps to bring these 3 documents into one space. And that might be simpler, or to cross-reference, but it's basically deduplication, take the best of any of them.
Yes, to begin with, we were working on it separately, but maybe it could be a good idea to merge the documents, especially to avoid, or as you said, mentioned, duplicate documents or requirements. And then, of course, you can see here authenticity of the documents and how this can be proved. Evaluation criteria. Of course, I'm not going to read the content of the whole document because it's quite long, but I refer to the main requirements. Regarding the decision-making procedure, I also mentioned it, and then also I refer to the ongoing obligations. Update after the admission, necessarily we would have to have updates as well, and notification of the obligation and lead times. Validation, compatibility, And then we have the sanctions, suspension, exclusion, delisting, and appeals. Of course, imposing some measures may be considered upon one or more on the grounds that you can see in number 7. Regarding the catalog of the measures, measures shall be selected and calibrated to the gravity and risk. Also, we have the procedure, the standard procedure, and the criteria for selecting the measures, and the appeals as well. The scheme owner may appeal and any adverse decision that they consider. The appeals against the operator decisions lie to the board. Regarding the effects of the measures, I also refer to the suspension, exclusion, and delisting. The issuer of the deeds are removed from the trusted list and flashed as inactive when would be the case. And what else? Yes, regarding the fees, as we were also considering to implement some fees. In number 8, I refer to the fees, non-payment, what would be the consequences of the non-payment, financial reporting. And what else do we have here? We have transparency, public access, data protection, and then technical and security policies. And the number 11, the registry maintenance, releases, workflow, and cutoff dates. I think in the definitions, I explain what the cutoff dates would be. And of course, the amendments as well, termination, entry into force. As you can see, the document is a little bit long, 37 pages, and then we're not going to study it now. But we will make sure that everybody has access to the document. And
in fact, Alina, what I'm going to ask the group to, and we'll put it in a minute, is that this document is in this deliverables folder, and everybody has comment access to this document now. So what I'm going to suggest is that people read this document and give us their kind of benefit of their thoughts or their questions. To your point about the length, part of that is because we've got the early draft had some governance requirements in it before I pasted in your new document. So I haven't yet rationalized the addition.
Yes, I have seen this, yes.
So you're very welcome to just cut stuff out that I've put in here, right? Just go ahead. You're the architect of the
yes, because in the end we would not want a huge recommendation like with 100 pages. This is not the idea.
No, but what I think, and this is again for the audience to comment on if they wish, is that these are, as Alex has pointed out in the chat, quite impressive pieces of work. It will be good to have them as an appendix or something to show that here are some working drafts for how it might work, so that the actual recommendation is nice and short and punchy, but the confidence that this could be done is given by the substantive documents that support it. So we don't sort of overwhelm people with everything. We say, look, here's a bunch of stuff.
No, obviously we cannot include everything in the recommendation. It would be too much.
Yep. But I do think the body of work should be referenced or acknowledged in the recommendation, that it's not, it certainly won't go to waste, and I think it actually supports the call that this is achievable and it's sensible to do it. And Harman, thank you again for your comment. You want to say anything?
Well, I think what I mentioned is that I think it's really impressive work, like you all are saying, and I think indeed it would be good to add it as an appendix to really make clear that there's been a lot of thoughts and detail into it, but indeed also try not to overwhelm people right away with it. I think we all agree on that, but I think this is super important stuff. And I think the the best thing would be if we could combine this with some concrete pragmatic examples where we bring this whole thing to life, right? And maybe it's just a piece of the story, right? Because maybe we don't have the exact 100% thing there that we kind of have in our mind, right? With this document that is now on the table. But I think actually some of the stuff we are doing actually fulfills already, some of these pieces, and can be really good basis to have a discussion how we would do this on a global level. Just as an example, we are already issuing kind of digital identity anchor credentials with the Dutch Chamber of Commerce. They actually are on a EIDAS trust list, right? So there is already kind of a PKD kind of trust list out there. That's the one that Europe uses, combined with particular key materials. So those things could be signed, etc. And I think if we would be able to plot that into this story, that would be really useful, because it would also kind of check the story, right? I think it's so difficult to do this all in theory. There's such a risk of making mistakes. That's why I think the combination would be great.
And that's why these, on the right-hand side of this diagram, these pilots are so important. So that's why I was so pleased when you put your hand up last time, Harman, for a potential pilot sort of interest in how we might get the Dutch Chamber of Commerce involved. I think it'd be awesome. And yes, to your observation that there are similar systems, and how, let's see if we can see how they work together. We are pursuing still the confirmation from Canada about their pilot, as well as India, and obviously Alina's looking forward to is leading the Spanish sort of pilot discussions as to how they will contribute. So the answer is yes, that will get tested. This sort of thinking will get tested when we try and do a pilot, and we'll see what stands up. But in the meantime, everyone is welcome to go through the document. I think there's some changes that I Sankar and Alina are obviously planning to do to this document, but I still would value people's sort of comments on the text that we have already, just even if all questions saying it's not clear here or whatever, and that'll help us make sure we finish the product as best we can. Alina, I muted you because there was an echo. Do you want to finish, and then we'll pass over to Sankar?
No, that was more or less the idea, that the document is pretty long, and I doubt we would be able, even if we wanted, to include all the content in the recommendation. Nevertheless, there are a few elements that we would, in my opinion, we would have to consider in the final recommendations, such as admission and the inclusion procedure. This is, in my opinion, highly important. And also to mention to the national focal points, the application, which is part of the admission via this dossier I referred to, obviously the board and the updates and sanctions, the fees. Of course, not all the content might be actually part of the recommendation, but via an annex, as John was mentioning. So that's why I think, from my point of view, it's better to have, let's say, the whole set of requirements and work and focus on each and every single detail, and then in the end, maybe choose what would have to be part of the recommendation itself, and then what would have to be part of the annex.
Yep. Actually, you've made me think of a good action if you could take it, which is, in the text of this document, you've highlighted the areas you think will need to be made clear in the recommendation, even if the details that are inside this document aren't in the recommendation, but the actual sort of topic is in the recommendation. It could be that it's all level 1 headings, as we're showing them in this document, are topics that need to be considered. But it might be useful to put a comment in here or something if you want to leave saying this should be in the recommendation.
Okay.
It's like,
this is a good idea, especially because we have other sections, and then of course we don't know how the content of the other section would develop and how long they will also be.
Yeah.
And we cannot have 1,000 pages within the recommendation.
No.
So I think it's better to develop separately each of these sections, and in the end, see what it can actually be part of the
We'll just ask our preferred AI system to summarize it for us all, and that'll be fine.
Yeah.
I'm kidding. That's brilliant. Thank you. Sankishan, are you okay to talk?
Yes, I am.
Cool.
But
Do you
what
want
do
to
you-
drive? Okay. Well, let me lead you in like a lamb to
Okay.
slaughter. No, I'm kidding. What I was thinking would be useful is for you to sort of share your. You did some work early on the updates by Marcus Allende to the sort of draft DIA spec, and you did some sort of thinking about how that might be incorporated. So I could explain that, but it would be good if you were talking, because it's not just my voice then that's talking on these things. And you've also done some other work on sort of checklists and other things that we're sort of looking at how we might incorporate. So I guess if you could just give us an update on the things you've been looking at over the last couple of weeks, and either you can share your screen and drive us to the documents, or you can tell me which ones to open.
I can share my screen.
Cool.
All right. This thing actually works. You can have two people sharing the screen and it still doesn't break. Beautiful. Okay. And let me go in some form of sequence. Let's just talk about this checklist. This came about because I was looking at the requirements list work in progress at that point. And I realized that in many cases, those who are implementing the systems or are trying to think about the systems usually work off something like a handy checklist of items that they can relate to with the main text of the actual requirements, and they can sort of review, audit, or assess how they have been progressing, or even how implementation has been done. So what I did was took the various sections, kind of collated them into the second column, which is the text of the requirement. And then you have the rationale as to why that requirement has to be in place. And the last column of compliance was just is something made up for the moment, because having three columns on this table that wasn't quite looking nice on the page. We can completely drop that. This is really to help folks get at a glance understanding of what it means to have be ready for a GTR implementation from the perspective of the legal aspect. These are all sections that I drew from, I believe it is work that Alina had done at the very start of the project. There's an actual document that talks about the legal requirements, which I think is, what is it now? Well, I think this is the one, the legal requirement, the working draft. I have to check whether this isn't actually, has it shifted to the screen that?
Yes.
Are
Yeah.
you
Yeah. It's open. It's opened the document now that you've just opened.
Okay. All right. Yeah. So this is basically what the checklist is about. It is nothing fancy. It is just stuff that exists in this document. The drama that will happen is if this document is going through a whole bunch of churn, then I'll have to ensure that this one doesn't get out of sync. But these two documents are in sync as of the date when I created it, which is kind of quite a while back, actually.
So Sankishan, just to make sure I've understood, the idea is, and I think I like the idea as I've understood it, is that this is a checklist that a candidate registrar could use to see, are we ready? Do we have the things in place to make it worth our while applying? What kind of things do we need to make sure we've got? And it's that sort of idea that they can go through as a checklist and find out. We've got two people with their hands up. Harman, you were first.
The exact same question, John. So this is a checklist for candidate registrars, like, for instance, any chamber of commerce in whatever country. Is that correct?
That is what I was thinking when I started building. There are two, I mean, there's a one reason I started doing the checklist is to actually force myself to learn more about what an intending registrar has to go through and try and figure out if it is too complicated or there are too many steps that we have put in that could be made more atomic. That was one. The other thing is, once I have that knowledge, can I translate it back to a easy to refer sort of list that makes the implementation process simple?
Yeah, I like the idea of having such a kind of a summarized checklist. So thanks.
And I'm wondering, Sankashan, because I'm lazy, if there's a way to automatically keep that checklist in sync with with its sort of source document. Can we use like the headings or something so that what that checklist is really just like a table of contents, but we write the headings in a way which lets us pull the paragraph out and put them into the checklist so that you can go, yes, I've got that, I've got that, I've got that. And if you want to know more, you can then go into the document to read more about what that thing means.
Yeah, I mean, there are ways to do this. I think some of the pre-AI work and checklist is usually provide a link to the source material, either the section or the header, so that you can check whether you are in sync or not. The other thing is, I have seen folks kind of ensure that the source document is not considered to be ready for publication until the checklist is updated and marked as ready for publication. So there's a dependency setting when you're trying to publish document and going live. The automated, perhaps AI dependent way, I can certainly take a look at. This form of the checklist is very primitive, and in fact, I put it together just to ensure that the group here can take a look at it and see if it's useful exercise or not, and if it's not, we can absolutely bin.
I think what for me would be great to add, firstly, I think it is useful. I think you've heard that from Harman, and Alex had his hand up for a question, and I would expect that he's put it down because it's been answered by Harman's question. I guess, Alex, is that right?
Yeah, it hasn't, but I'm going to wait till Sankashan finishes, and I think I'll ask it at the end because I don't want to disrupt the flow.
We're just waiting with bated breath now. I would like if you could to put a preamble at the beginning of that document snippet that you have, Sankashan, just explaining how you expect the document to be used, so that if anybody opens it by chance in this folder, they kind of get to see why what the document is aiming to achieve. So I think it's a good idea. I think we should persist. We should have it as in our little armory of things that we've provided in sort of annexes and stuff. So yeah, good job. Now the other thing you were doing is on the Marcus Allande's comment. So it's for those that haven't seen it, there's see if I can get to the right bit. There's an existing definition of digital identity anchors in the specification written for UNTP, United Nations Transparency Protocol. This is the sort of website pages that are developed from GitLab now hosted content, markdown content, and inside here is a whole bunch of text and explanation that we are kind of now the curators of and providers of comments too. So like with any other GitLab environment, you can provide comments and issues and raise changes. So Sankashan, am I right in thinking that the idea was to take these comments that had been produced by Marcus, and then you'd kind of gone through and looked at, and I think you had too, Alina, and then decide how to do a sort of a pull request back into UNTP? Is that our current thinking?
Yes. So in terms of artifacts in repositories, I am considering the DIA project to be some sort of an upstream on which this project would depend, or it either directly, so it refers and says that use DIA as a predominant identifier, or indirect. And in this upstream downstream relationship, what is very common in software development is that downstream projects have unique requirements that, or features or enhancements that they require from the upstream. So they bundle up to everything together in individual PRs or something, and then advocate for that to be included upstream. My current thinking about how this project and DIA are intertwined is using that upstream downstream model. I think that we are the downstream of DIA, and what Marcus has done is effectively create a way to build a pull request in his document, he has added other things that should be issues on the upstream DIA projects, including specific instances where he has said that there should be a dictionary entry or a glossary entry and stuff like that. But in his document that you now have on screen, there's a substantial amount of text that he has added or refined. So I've changed all of that into one single document, which is, I think, titled DIA ready for PR or some straight, that one, the new version of working properly. So effectively, if we are able to export this into a markdown format, it could be one mega-sized PR for the DIA project. They may or may not like it, but essentially, this is, I think, the distillation of what the GTR downstream requires the DIA to do in terms of accepting and evaluating the changes we propose.
Yep. I agree. What I guess I should take as an action is to talk with Steve Capel, the project lead for UNTP, and ask his opinion about the best way to do that sort of passing upstream request to change the text that is an improvement, arguably, to the current standard text of the DIA specification in the UNTP. Because yes, it's one very large pull request that we would be subjecting them to, but that might be the best way, easiest way for them to accept it. And then we would, if I understand you correctly, Sankar, we'd continue to evolve and think about the specifics that we have downstream with the DIA, which might lead to further subsequent updates upstream, if they're necessary.
Yes, I think we could actually end up filing smaller, more atomic issues, propose pull requests, and get done. In fact, this can be done as atomic issues and PRs as well. Just that because it's a mega update to a piece of text, it might result in the DIA releasing a minor version update to their current spec, which is in most cases fine with upstream projects. All right, I'm done, and Alex has been waiting patiently, so let's hear him.
Yeah, I've been reading through as you've been presenting, Sankar, John. One question I have, which I didn't see in the checklist or in the spec, is maybe it would be worth adding as a section. Is like, who stores the DIA, and is there any recommendations on how the DIAs are stored? Like, is it the authoritative issuer that stores all the DIAs that they have issued? And is there a recommendation on how those get persisted to make sure that they are kept sort of up to date and versioned correctly?
A great question. It segues into what was going to be a lot of the conversation today. We won't have too much time to go through a lot of this, but that question about who stores the DIAs, where are they? That sort of goes to the heart of the kind of architecture. Now, we are using a body of thinking that comes to us from UNTP. So the slides I'm showing you right now, I'll explain. The sort of structure, if you like, or the idea is that we have authoritative registrars, nation state type government bodies that register the things that we're interested in supply chain. So the Netherlands, the Dutch Chamber of Commerce. In Australia, we've got our ABN system and ASIC and the people that register companies and so on. So there's basically these organizations within a state or government country that register all these things. And we are recognizing them in a directory that we're maintaining this sort of circular color wheel. Now, the question about who issues the DIA, the answer to that immediate question is it's the registrar that issues the digital identity anchor to the subject, to the holder, the company, the organization, and so on. Where is it stored? Now, we would expect, as is the normal operation procedure, that the registrar remembers what they've issued, right? They've got a kind of a gold record, if you like, of the stuff that they do, what they've issued and what they've revoked, and so they maintain their own sort of system. But they publish or issue these verifiable credentials to the holder. In our deck, that is explained in our deck sort of way back sort of around about here, this sequence of discussion here, where we talk about what happens when you get to a digital identity anchor. Here we go, the the authoritative source for the buyer, and the digital identity anchor. But the idea for the digital identity anchor is the same as all credentials in UNTP. The idea that UNTP has is that while Steve Capel doesn't like the idea of wallets, my way of helping us understand this is that the enterprise has a wallet in which they receive these credentials issued to them by authoritative bodies. They make these credentials, some of them, accessible to their downstream customers and their customers' customers and so on. And they may issue their own credentials to do with their products, for example, that they produce. So this diagram here is a refinement of a sort of battery life cycle kind of diagram. If I take away those overlays there, you get a kind of a flow where you're mining ore on the left-hand side, and you're eventually recycling the batteries that have gone into cars in the middle of all of this whole life cycle. The sort of splattering of these credentials on this diagram are to do with the types of credentials that might be issued at each moment in time. And UNTP's idea is that these credentials are made available, but stored by the issuer themselves. And they're kind of therefore made available. Alina.
Yes, John. I was just thinking now of our own credentials that we have within Land and Business Registry. In Business Register, it's named IRUS or IRUS. Okay, it's not verifiable, but still it's a credential, and we issue it. So we also store the credential. And on the other hand, I was now thinking about the VLIs. Of course, who is issuing it and who is storing it might be a similar comparison.
Yes. Yeah, there's and Harman's pointed out there's a similar structure that he's worked on in the Netherlands. So there are subtleties in this model. The subtleties are things like a company issuing a credential for its digital product passport. It's all self-issuing. It's making some declarations, but it's building into those declarations links to other claims it might hold. Like it's got a conformity credential, it's got a digital identity anchor from a registrar, it's got these other things. So there's a sort of linked data structure, the parties in this linked data structure have their own ways of storing. The idea from UNTP, the whole central tenet of this protocol concept is this transparency graph, the ability to traverse across this whole space of this data, so that at the far right, you could do some sort of global greenhouse gas emission kind of calculation, a scope 3 check, if you like, for how much carbon was emitted over the life cycle of this vehicle, for example. So that sort of requires this ability to link. And what UNTP is trying to do with the architecture is not to over-force the details of where you store these things and how they're stored. So it's quite possible for one participant to store them on a distributed ledger or a blockchain, and another to use another form of system. As long as they're accessible and there's a DID method and there's a sort of accessibility stuff, it doesn't necessarily matter. They have to be resolved, but it doesn't matter how they're being done. So that's sort of the central tenet, Alex, of the thinking. Did that answer your question?
Yeah, exactly. I think what would be really valuable based on that is to have a common resolution format for DIAs themselves, because I think that maybe leads on to the conversation later. Yeah,
that was the one I wanted to have today, kind of. I don't mind not having it because I thought the first conversations by Alina and by Sanksha were really important. So I was sort of preparing to, this is a spec that I showed you. This spec leads to a whole bunch of, not the use cases, a whole bunch of sort of details, including a sort of breakdown of the current structures for the DIA. Now, what I think is necessary, and this is what this team is going to get to the point of, is testing the thinking inside this part of the specification, because it's the detail that matters when you get to sort of pilots and interoperability. We get to see, does it actually work like that? We get to test the ideas that, for example, Alina mentioned LEIs, legal entity identifiers. What if we reference an LEI inside a DIA? How does that work? What if they got a VLI? How do we, there's all sorts of how do we's and what ifs to consider. And we know there are already some working prototypes and existing sort of extensions for UNTP. So we can go back to those and see what they've done. But our job is really to drill deep and hard into the digital identity anchor structure and to sort of see if it actually does work the way I think it should work. Or not I should think it should work, the way it's thought it should work.
Yeah, no, this is awesome that you're going into this. Oh, just really quickly, before passing over to Alina, with regards to the pilots on this, I appreciate a lot of it's probably being done with DidWeb and web-based infrastructure. But if you do want to do any testing with a DLT, do let me know, because we do have the capabilities to support DIAs on checked, which could be really cool to test out as well.
We'd be delighted if you're part of it, if you're part of the mix, Alex. That would be superb. I think you know, that all are welcome, really. So that's very cool. Yes, the answer is yes, and the answer is yes to Ivan, I think, who's had to go away as well. But all good. Alina, your hands up.
Yes, I think Ivan from Glaive is online now, and maybe he could tell us quickly, because we were asking regarding who is issuing and who is storing the credential. It might be the same in the case of the VLIs, and then maybe he can tell us quickly.
He's just left, I think. Ivan, are you still there? But if he was online when we went through our conversation about VLIs, PKDs. Sorry, where's VLIs? We have in this deck a architecture diagram. Here we go. Okay.
Because I think not Glaive is issuing directly the credential, by the authorized issuers by Glaive is issuing it, and then who's storing it is not storing in Glaive either. It's maybe the holder.
So let's separate two things. The legal entity identifier issuance process and storage process is one thing, and that's on this diagram in some respects. So the Glyph offers or runs a Glyph system that you can, any of us now can look up an LEI and see who it's linked to and so on. They also have a VLI, and that's issued by QVIs, which I haven't drawn on here, but they're a body similar to this LOU, if you like. A kind of special case of an LOU that actually are accredited to issue a VLEI. The VLEIs are a verifiable credential, and they're held by the organization. And that's sort of that's a central tenet, I suppose, about the whole way that the VLEI structure works. So it's based on a Kerry stack approach. It's quite sophisticated, and it's quite well documented on the Glyph system. So they have a similar architectural principle at VLEIs to the one we're proposing for UNTP. That the holder is the person with the VLEI actually holds the VLEI themselves. And now we're at just about the top of the hour. I tried and finished these at 10 minutes to, and it's now 4 minutes to the top of the hour, on the premise that others have meetings to go to at the top of the hour. Yes, Alex, it is more flexible or open, I suppose, but we have to be careful to make sure it works, right? It can't be so open it doesn't work. So it's got to have a certain amount of interoperability to make sure it does actually work. So I propose to call a quit at this point, and to ask your sort of encourage you to go into these documents and sort of put your comments in, and make them as hopefully as constructive as possible, right? Give us an action we can actually do. If you generally can't understand something, please ask that question. We'll look to sort of explain it. But if you know there's a way to improve the text, tell us how to improve it, and we'll take that action. Okay, that's all for today then. Thank you very much, Alina and Akasha.
Thank you everybody. Thank you, John.
And
Thanks
everybody.
Bye.
Thank you.
Cheers, guys.
Great job. Bye, guys.